Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa. Hello. I hope, or we hope, you have been well. We are a bit late from our time, not a bit, very late. And we apologize for that. Today, our topic is China and Africa. Like, we're gonna check the mentalities there. Uh, the topic is, of course, what Africa thinks about China's industrial overcapacity. What is overcapacity by itself? Who said it? For what it is used? These are the things we are going to look at as we, shuttle between China and Africa in general. For this, to analyze it, we have here Kwame Gonza. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet, and greetings to everyone who's watching the platform, who's watching Connect Africa. And we want to thank you for being part of the journey that we are on. And of course, that is, bringing about consciousness, among our people. And of course, we also learn. We saw here, a lot of people, sometimes we invited them to talk to the, platform. The Juma has been here, and other people are always here, contributing in the chat section. So we also get to learn. But more so, the purpose, of course, for the platform, is to bring out that Pan-African narrative, the African side of things. What are we thinking about things? What should we be saying as Africans also? Yeah, so yeah, that is it. I think we are really appreciative for that continued support by all of you who are subscribed to the channel. We thank you very much. And yeah, Malati, back to you. I think let's get to it.
Yeah, definitely. We don't want to take more time. Kwame, I don't know if I can say in 2024, but mostly 2022, 2023, like the American politicians have been shuttling to Africa, to China. Was it to China also at some
Yeah.
point? And around it. So, like people like the Foreign Secretary, the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, Janet Yellen. Both of them have been in Africa for like Blinken. I mean, so many times. Now, these people, they have characterized China's economy as one of overcapacity due to its global leading role in the production of electric cars, or like these are like what the electric cars, yeah, and then the renewable energy, the solar energy, things like that. Now, can you first uh, give us a background of how China reached here to be the leader in this industry? I hear you call it so many times the fourth industrial generation, something like that. And where was the West, like the US and Europe, when China was building this up?
Thank you, Mallet. So for those people who know, of course, China, how it has been built, they know that, of course, the West has made a lot of investment in China. But these investments, which were made in China in themselves, were not by accident. Of course, the West had interests in China due to the market. You remember that this is a market of also 1.4 billion people, 1.2, 1.4 billion people, almost the same size as India, and then also the same size as Africa, the whole of Africa. But unlike Africa, China's market is integrated, all right, is integrated altogether. Now, when China emerged from the century of humiliation in 1949, President Mao came to power. He built a base. He built an industrial base in China, and by the 70s, of course, the Chinese were the leading supplier of items like steel on the global, international market, and even grain. All right, to some extent. So China had a very strong industrial base, including, of course, education. They were very strong on education. That the Chinese people were very educated, because you cannot have industrialization unless you have a very strong population, which is educated in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So by the 70s, by the dawn of the 70s, China was way up there when it came to literacy, concerning the industrial, concerning these subjects: engineering, science, engineering, technology, and mathematics, of course, which is the STEM subjects. Now, China had prepared itself on that side. So when President Mao Zedong died, then there was the opening up by Deng Xiaoping, of course, of China, and then Deng Xiaoping invited the other parts of the world to interact with China, or open China up for interaction with other parts of the world. And that is when America was almost at the top of the world, during that period of the 80s, that they had, very good companies, very powerful companies that time. For example, General Electric, countries, companies like General Electric, all right? They had Ford, General Motors, all these, they rushed into China to build vehicles from there. Because remember, in the 80s, people like Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric, were saying, we're talking about shareholder maximization, value maximization on behalf of the shareholder, which meant that their companies were structured in a way that they should make profit. All right, they should make maximum profit, and therefore, they claim that uh, the purpose of, a CEO or a company is to maximize shareholder value. So that meant that they have to look. It meant that they had to look for where there was cheap labor on the international stage. So because China had prepared itself very well, and they had educated people in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that is why it is very important. I want people to pay, very close attention to this, because if Africa is going to develop, also for us, we have to invest in these, sectors, these subjects, because that is where they are competing now. As we are seeing that the United States, why they are warring with China, is because of technology, leadership in technology. And if you want to be a leader in technology, you have to invest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And of course, even when we go back, the reason why we were colonized as a people is because we are lagging behind technologically. So we have to invest in this part as Africans. So because China had prepared itself, and these industries, these are engineering, of course, industries. If you are talking about the manufacturing of vehicles, and you are also talking about the manufacturing of electric equipment, electronic equipment. So Japan had risen, and it had relatively, grown, even to the point that Japan almost threatened the United States, actually, and the United States had to react, because Japan came and flooded the United States market with vehicles which were cheaper and more reliable. Okay, and therefore, Japan almost conquered the United States market. So the United States had to fight back and blackmail even Japan to push it down, like what you are seeing even they are doing to China today. They did that to Japan when Japan became the second biggest economy. Now, China was ready with all these educated people in science and technology, and all these subjects that are necessary for industrialization. So the American industrialists, they were looking at profit, the maximization of profit. Now they went into China and they found this fertile ground where labor was cheap, was very cheap. So they made equipment in China and sent them back to the Western world to sell it over there at the same price which they were selling when they were paying at a higher cost of labor. So they deindustrialized the Western world. All right, that is to say. So companies like General Motors, Ford, and all the others, Volkswagen from Europe, they rushed into China to make profit, to make the items that they set up industries. So China was learning in this process. China, structured its economy in such a way that if you wanted to come in and enjoy the market itself, because China was growing itself, so they wanted to enjoy the market and also take advantage of the labor within China. They wanted to sell their products within China, but at the same time they wanted to use that labor. So they achieved both of these things. Now, but China, what it saw as as an advantage was for it to structure its economy in such a way that if you wanted to set up a company within the country, you had to set it up as a joint venture, all right, with a Chinese company. Now, China was able to take advantage of this by having its people learn how these technologies, were, coming about, how these technologies came about. All right, so people learned how to make vehicles. People learned how to make fridges, for example, air conditioners, and all these technologies. Actually, they first appeared in the United States, and of course, Japan also copied the same things. It copied those technologies because Japan also was just copying vehicles which were coming from the United States, and of course, China also came late on that vehicle, the automobile, which is the internal commercial combustion engine vehicles. It came late on the internal combustion engines, but at least it succeeded when it came to electronics. China succeeded in copying when it came to electronics. So that's how China came about. Now, when the period reached in the later part of 2000s, which we are in, there was change in technology. But remember, China during this industrialization process, it was rapid during the 2000s. There was a lot of growth. There was rapid growth in China, which was, they were moving fast to the point that they were destroying the environment at the same time. All right. And therefore, in those years of 2000, 2012, we could see that in China, even in Beijing itself, there was a lot of smog in the air. The air was dirty. In the atmosphere, it was really dirty, that in Beijing itself, people used to put on masks. All right. Now, the Chinese started looking for solutions on how to offset this effect of rapid industrialization, which came with the destruction of the environment. And that is how the Chinese started investing in things like solar, these new technologies. They started actually experimenting with these new technologies like solar, for example. That's why we see even today the leading supplier of solar panels is China. Now they also started experimenting with electric vehicles. All right. And then that is when people like Jeremy Rifkin, who is an American, came up with a book called The Third Industrial Revolution. Now, one Chinese premier got that book and he gave it to his people and they read it and they said they have to implement the book. Now, what the book mentioned is that the an industrial revolution, for it to occur, you need three technologies which are key. You need a source of energy, right? And then you need a transportation system, and then you need a communication system. All right. So these technologies, they come together. If you go to the third industrial revolution, you go to the first industrial revolution, which happened in Britain. You talk about steam, which was the source of energy. You talk about the engine, the steam engine, and the train, which was invented as a means of transportation. Then you talk about the telegram. All right. So they led Britain, when these technologies came and converged together, they led Britain to explode, in power in itself, that Britain came and even dominated the world. That is why you see even all these countries which were, colonized by Britain, all those places, there is a train. They were the first people to build the trains, in Britain. So the Industrial Revolution happened there. A lot of economic activity, because these technologies, when they come together, they lead to an explosion in jobs and economic activity, and cities coming up, because people started moving from town to town. Goods started moving rapidly. So it's the same thing which happened in the United States later on in the second industrial revolution, which led to the discovery of refining of hydrocarbons. people like Rockefeller, they started refining oil. Now oil became an item. Now oil at the same time powered the vehicle, whereby Henry Ford put the vehicle on the road, commercialized, cars, in addition to the big network of, trains, a railway network which the United States had. And then they discovered then electricity. All right. That is another form of energy, of course. And then the telephone, of course, they discovered the telephone. So you had oil, and then you had the train, and then the automobile, which came in to complement the vehicle, who's Henry Ford. And then you had the discovery of the telephone. So business now became even faster than when it was in Britain during the first industrial revolution. So business moved faster, cities sprang up rapidly and stuff like that, because people now can move easily and goods can move easily, like from a train station. Now you have a vehicle instead of a horse, which was dragging, a horse and buggy, which was dragging the goods. Now you can move them rapidly with the vehicle. So then this means that there's rapid economic activity. So this is what Jeremy Rifkin noticed, that even today, as we speak right now, this kind of convergence of these technologies actually is happening right now as we are speaking. But so what his thesis at first was that the first country to enter this new energy, whereby we abandon the use of hydrocarbon, as you have been hearing about climate change and all that, is the country which is going to win. And then the country which will use that new energy, new form of energy, which is electricity, as a form of power, and then you power the new form of transportation. Now we are talking about electric cars and then electric trains and stuff like that. And of course, the new communication system, which is the Internet of Things, and of course, artificial intelligence. All right. And all these three things, China was able to invest, initially, and that is what has put it to where it is right now. Now, this production led to problems, in the later part of course, 2020, starting 2020, that the United States, 2018 actually, starting 2018, that the United States, of course, felt threatened. It is behind on almost all these technologies, apart from artificial intelligence, where it is leading. But artificial intelligence in itself is not an industrial revolution. Artificial intelligence is just, unlike what many people are saying, this one I'm the first to say it here. Artificial intelligence is just a part of the communication system, right? It's just a communication system in itself. So it is not that it is an industrial revolution in itself. And what has been happening actually, with with the intelligent items, what they have been calling the fourth industrial revolution, is not really a fourth industrial revolution. What is happening right now is the third industrial revolution that is happening, and is actually happening in China. Because for an industrial revolution, like I say, to happen, a couple of technologies have to come together. Now, in addition to those technologies, when it comes to communication technology, especially, China is the one who's leading, because they are the ones who discovered actually 5G. So this is the clash now that we are seeing between the United States and China, that China has heavily invested in these technologies. Now, the vehicles with the engines are phasing out now. They are looked at as obsolete technology. And who is leading in the production of these vehicles, the new energy vehicles, which is electric vehicles, is China who's leading in that. The production of solar panels is China who's leading. Now, the one who leads in these technologies, remember, is the one who gets the opportunity to grow rapidly. That in his country, you have a lot of jobs available because of these technologies, these new technologies, because you are now the producer for the rest of the world. The rest of the world becomes a consumer to you. So now that means that your people, they get a lot of jobs. So this is why these technologies are very important. Now, America and Europe, they are trying to fight for a share of that technology. They are trying to fight for a share of that industrial revolution, to be part of it. So now that's why they see China, as an enemy when it comes to this particular situation that we are talking about right now.
Very interesting story. But one question, though, I didn't want to interrupt you, where China, how it it copied those technologies because one of the conditions were to have a joint venture, right? But this is practiced also in Africa. We talk, our heads of states talk about FDI, this foreign direct investment, but when they cannot, it's also a joint venture, isn't it? Or Africa is looking at
Yeah,
it differently.
so in Africa, like there has not been like it has not been strategic, and actually, I think it's one of the African forefathers. I don't know whether it was Machar, Samuel Machar of Mozambique, who said that if we are not careful, I don't know whether it was Marshall or it was Nkrumah, but Nkrumah, of course, is the one who mentioned a lot about the workings of neocolonialism. That if we are not careful, the investment, the so-called investment, will come back, to Africa. The finance, the colonialists will come back to the continent in form of investors, and they will exploit the continent. So the capitalist system in itself, it required you to deal with it strategically, and you needed to have a very strong government that is pro people, and the pro people in a sense that it represented the people which it purports to represent, which is the indigenous people. And in China, that was the case, that the Chinese, they took over the government. And yesterday we were looking at, a few days ago, we have published a video where China rejected the International Monetary Fund loan. So the Chinese took over the government, that the government now represented the people, all right, in what Mao Zedong called dictatorship of the proletariat. So basically, what it means is that the people are supreme. They are the ones who are the dictators in the country. So the dictation of the people is the one which governs what people want, what people, you look at people's needs, and then so the people become the dictator. There's no one dictator in the country, that the leaders are not the dictator. The leaders are merely implementers, like what we see Xi Jinping doing and Mao Zedong and all these. So they are working on the interests of the people. Now, that was not the case in Africa. That our independence was, of course, compromised 1966 with the overthrow of Nkrumah, and then later on with the overthrow of other leaders like Haile Selassie and all the others, who were overthrown, Lumumba and all these presidents. So we lost control of the continent itself, right? And these foreign forces, they came into the continent and took over. Now, it meant that the leaders which we got, unlike China, where they made decisions for themselves which are going to benefit the people and benefit the country, in Africa, the presidents started making, the ones who were there, because they were planted there, they were installed there, or they even, they were just encouraging the worst from our society. The West was just encouraging the worst groups from our society to take over power, because these groups would benefit them and they will not benefit the African people, like Mobutu Sese Seko. And you look at people like people who overthrew Nkrumah. You look at people like Blaise Compaoré, who overthrew Sankara, and he was there for almost 40 years also. Blaise Compaoré was almost in power for 40 years. He was just serving France. So they came to encourage these groups. These groups, they were encouraged to take over power in Africa. So the situation became chaotic, that now the economies were directed by the West. So this is the difference with them. Now, the Chinese put up a policy. For us, we did not have a policy. Foreign investment or foreign direct investment, even up to today, it comes and does what it wants. They are like, absolute bosses when they come to our economies. So this is the difference. This is not the case in China. In China, you can't just go and invest, for example, in the energy sector, in the Chinese, economy. If you are a foreigner, you can't just go and do that. You can't just go and invest in water. You see, so the basic goods, okay, the basic need, the needs of the people, the essential goods, you cannot just go in there in China and invest in them, because these, they have, the government has monopoly over them. And also, you cannot go and invest in certain minerals in the country and say that you have come as a foreign direct investor. So even the basic things like manufacturing of TVs or manufacturing of vehicles, even those ones, you have to set up a joint venture which is going to benefit China. And so if you look at the 7-year development plan which Kwame Nkrumah was launching before he was overthrown, it also looked like this, that you have to come and invest according to our needs. You can't just come as a foreigner, as a foreign bank in China, and invest into the Chinese financial sector. You see, the Chinese government has control over the financial sector. So this again reminds us of what is happening even in Ethiopia, that you can see that Prime Minister Abiy in Ethiopia, for example, where the IMF is trying to push itself inside and even into the financial sector, is trying to protect the indigenous banks within the country and positioning them in such a way that they will survive and be able to protect the financial interests of the country. Now, they don't want it. The IMF doesn't want this. So they come and take over most of these countries. So that is what happened in Africa. Now, when this happens, unlike in China, when this happens, like in places like Africa, where you don't have like a clear policy of technology transfer, or you are just talking about it, then as a small country, for example, Togo, which maybe has 4 or 5 million people, if these investors come, you don't have an advantage. Remember, we said that China had the advantage of educated people, right? So any industry could move there. And then it had the advantage of a huge market. The market was so huge that they wanted to play a part in that particular market. All right. So now, if you go to a country like Togo, you can't, there's no all these advantages. Now, it means that the so called foreign direct investment is going to dictate to you what to do in your country. All right. So you cannot put these conditions which China put when it was, coming up, when it was growing, even today. All right. You cannot put them, because if you try to put them, they will go away. But in China, they will not go away because they want to take advantage of this labor and the huge market of the country. So this is why Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was pushing for a unified African continent. So this is why, because he was looking at the fact that we're going to leverage on a big market. We're going to leverage on the resources. All right. And then we are going to educate our people and put ourselves in a position that anyone who wants to invest from outside, we become almost an irresistible ground. All right. So that is how technology, was able to come up in China. And I hope that our people will be able to, to appreciate that explanation.
Now let's go to the word overcapacity, where the Secretary of State Blinken and Yellen, what was her name? Yellen,
Yeah.
who used that term overcapacity. So, is first of all, is there really overcapacity? So, if yes, what are the numbers are showing? And then, if no, why all this propagandas?
Yeah, so the overcapacity issue, I think, is just America admitting that it is trying to contain China. Of course, China has been saying this. The Chinese premier, Chinese foreign minister, and all of these people have been talking about the fact, and Chinese commentators, of course, have been saying that the United States is trying to contain China. Uh, and of course, it is simply because it is behind, all right? But there is really no such overcapacity. If you look at the amount of vehicles in the United States in itself, China's vehicles are almost non-existent. It doesn't almost sell vehicles the United States. All right. So if you are talking about overcapacity, there's almost nothing which is being sold over there. So if there's anything, maybe there's overcapacity from Europe into China, because Europe and the United States, they are the ones who have dominated the Chinese automobile industry for a long time. They had almost 100% control of the Chinese automobile industry. It is now that China got an advantage, that because it was not able to jump onto and to adopt quickly when it came to the internal combustion engine vehicles, that China was able to adopt quickly the electric vehicles. And remember, it's because of the need which it had as a country when it comes to the pollution which was happening in China due to the rapid industrialization. So they had the need to clean up their environment. Now, this means that the vehicles are just arriving in the West. The Chinese vehicles, the automobile electric vehicles are just arriving in the West. They are not even, about 10%. All right. In the United States, they are almost non-existent. All right, they are not even up to 1%. In Europe, they are not even yet up to 10%. So there's nothing like overcapacity, but it's just an admission and fear, of course, by the West, of what is happening and the fact that they are behind in all these technologies. So they feel that they have to pull someone down and they have to invent all these lies and big words, of course, just like what they did when they are, of course, trying to go to Iraq, that they have to invent words like terrorism, and all these, and then scare the world that there is some sort of big terrorist. And you are seeing that even in the Sahel, we are in the Sahel in Africa here, they are inventing big word that Al Qaeda is attacking Africa. Al Qaeda is attacking Africa. You see, but these people came when the United States and NATO, of course, overthrew the government in Libya. But they are trying to threaten the whole continent. Now, this is to justify that the United States military and the European military, bases should be present in the African continent. And of course, we know what they want to do, which is the exploitation of resources. So the word overcapacity is just an excuse for the United States to reject, of course, and of course they followed this up with the tariffs to reject the new technology that is coming, from China, and the fact that China is leading in these key technologies. So is that just an admission that we are behind and we need to do something about it to catch up, and which is not very easy. It's almost saying like that Britain should have fought very hard to catch up with the United States when the United States entered and it was leading when it came to the second industrial revolution. It was not possible because Britain did not have such a big population as the United States. That is number one. And number two, so which meant that it did not have that kind of big market. And the technologies themselves, they did not originate from Britain. Those new technologies, they did not originate from Britain. So when it comes to electric vehicles and the adoption of, for example, high-speed trains, that China has the biggest network of high-speed train, more than the whole world combined. This is not an accident, all right, that these people have indigenized these technologies and even new renewable energy technologies. So in the West, the other thing is that it is expensive to produce these items over there in the West due to the high cost of labor. The GDP per capita in the United States is $87,000. So you can see that the cost of living over there is high, which means that the labor costs are high. All right, even it's the same thing with Europe. So people who are producers, they cannot cheaply produce like solar panels in the United States and be competitive globally. And China has a lower labor cost and it can produce these items and be competitive globally. All right. So this is the difference. Now, the United States, because it cannot achieve this, now decides to blackmail, China, and try to use these big words such as overcapacity there, overcapacity here.
Yeah, one good they're good at is that they come up with words. I remember one Ghanaian professor. I found him here in Europe and he told me, you know what, we have everything, he says, the knowledge and everything. It just we didn't have the name. They come and they just write it and give it a name. But we know everything. We have it, and even what they study is coming to our countries. There, yeah, something like that, he said. Well, um, moving on. Now, let's assume that this overcapacity thing is there. And China did as Yellen and US politician advised, meaning, let's say that it is there. Now, the accompanying containment strategy, would this save the declining Western economies?
It is difficult. It is extremely difficult because the industries which left the United States in themselves, even when they went to China, even though of course there was a lot of creation, they created a lot of wealth in the 80s, like those companies which deindustrialized out of the United States and went to Asia, and all these countries, but especially, more especially China, where there was cheap labor, cheap skilled labor. It's not just labor, but there was cheap skilled labor, right? This was very important. So the fact that competition was created. Remember when we were analyzing something about Africa's industrialization, which of course we will do an extensive, analysis on Africa's industrial sector and industrialization, is that when we were industrializing after independence as the African continent, the West did not like it. They didn't see this as a very good thing, because remember when they came to colonize, what they wanted two things which are very important. But at first, when they came with slavery, they wanted labor. All right, that is what they wanted, to turn the raw materials in what they called the New World, in the lands which they took over, like the United States and the Caribbean. They took over from the indigenous people. They came, and of course they wanted labor. But during colonialism, the period of colonialism, they wanted two important things, which was the raw materials, for their industry, because the first industrial revolution, when the industrialization started in Britain, they needed raw materials to convert into finished goods. All right. Now they needed also the market. So after our independence period, they saw industrialization in the former colonies as an enemy. They saw the creation of a real bourgeoisie in the newly independent African states as an enemy, because this would be competition to their industries. All right,
Mm-hmm.
so this is how, of course, short-sighted they were. But and of course, this is what followed the overthrow of governments on the African continent, because of the fear of the rise of industries into the former colony, from the former colonies, because these former colonies, of course, would compete. I mean, these industries in the former colonies would compete on the market, and then they would compete for the raw materials. Okay, so this was the reason for the fighting of the generation which led Africa to industrialization, so that they can remove it. Because this is the generation which understood this clearly, that we have to industrialize as a continent. Now, when they fought this generation and removed it, then of course they instituted whatever they wanted on the African continent. And that's why you hear now people who pay only lip service to industrialization, they say, oh, we must add value. You hear them in conferences, even at the African Union. We must add value to our good. We must add value. But when they go home, they borrow all these monies, but they don't invest them. Now, this is the generation which, for them, the West embraced this generation. Now, unlike Africa, in China, like I said, there was total control of the government by the Chinese people. All right. So when the Chinese people controlled their government, uh, it meant that the West, created almost its own competition. And so that's why you have companies like Huawei, to which the United States put a lot of sanctions. And why sanctions on Huawei? Because Huawei was ahead, had pulled ahead. Even though the Chinese copied technologies, they reached a point that they led the technology. They started innovating more than the West. All right, and they were being incentivized by the government, and of course, they are even producing four times the engineering students compared to, for example, the United States, who is the leader of the West. So all these factors, and the fact that the Chinese market is still big, and China has a very special relationship with the global South. Also, this is a key issue in how China deals with the world. That China deals with the rest of the world relatively, respectively. Okay, it respects the rest of the world compared to the West, and how the West deals with us. China relatively respects us as Africans compared to the West. When the West comes, they want to take everything from us. So this question, you can look at it from a geopolitical point of view, and then also from you can look at it from a geopolitical point of view, from a political point of view, that China is very organized inside, of course, and therefore these factors put together, that China now can secure raw materials, with less friction from the global South, from, like, even from Africa specifically, which we are interested in. And when it secures these materials at a relatively good price, it creates a very good environment in these countries of the global South. All right. Now it takes these raw materials and then creates goods with the cheap labor. The United States cannot achieve this. All right. Of course, it has to create wars. You have seen everywhere it has been in the Middle East. Everywhere where it leaves war, it has destroyed everywhere. leaves, Iraq, destruction, complete destruction in a country which was functional. They go to Syria, they destroy the place. Now they have left Syria, they have gone to Afghanistan, they destroyed the place. They have come out, now they have come to, to Ukraine, and they are destroying the place over there. They are sending weapons and destruction. Now they have come also to Africa, where of course the Africans now they are fighting back. We the Africans now are fighting back to push them out. As we have seen that Niger expelled them and stuff like that. Because everywhere where they go, destruction. They came to Somalia in 1993. They left it destruction. The country has never recovered up to now, ever since the United States intervened. So these people have become the global population, and especially in the global south also, has become weary, that is tired of this kind of approach. Now, that is from a geopolitical standpoint, that all these things they work against the United States, and it has created this environment. And of course, the West, because the West always follows the United States where it goes. So they have created their own environment when it comes to raw materials, that they cannot secure the raw materials, peacefully. All right. And so that China beats them in that line. Now, the Chinese market, still has a huge, the Chinese, China as a country still has a huge population, which is providing a big market. Okay. And so relatively, they have even not achieved like a fully developed, status. Their GDP per capita, I think, is around $10,000 in China, something like that. And if you look at the United States, GDP per capita is 87,000. So the cost of labor in China is still relatively low, and yet they are still producing more engineers. So they are ahead. They have a huge market still. They have these technologies which they have mastered. Now it is very difficult for the United States to compete in that area, because they are not leading even in the technologies themselves now. If you talk about high-speed train, in the United States, they barely have 1,000 kilometers of high-speed train. Now,
Wow.
it means that people cannot move faster, all right? In China, they are now completing more than 50,000. They have been having 45,000 kilometers of high-speed train. That's a lot. All right. Now they are completing. They are trying to complete so that they can have about 50,000, kilometers. So you can see that in all sides, when the communication is cheaper in China, Huawei is the one who's leading and is pumping out these technologies. So the United States barely has, companies which are innovating to that point. And of course, China is also adopting the semiconductor, manufacturing. So in all these measures, market, geopolitically, the securing of raw materials, and then the production, the factors, when you look at the factors of production, they are still on the side of China, all of them. So it is very difficult now for the United States to compete. It is extremely difficult. And the fact is that the United States as a country has been wasting a lot of money, in wars, fighting senseless wars and going to invade countries to impose what they think is their thinking, impose that thinking on other people, impose the European thinking on other countries. So this has created problems for them, that they spent a huge amount of money, and they are fighting all these wars. So it depleted the United States economy, that right now the country is around, $35 trillion in debt. All right. And of course, China owns part of that debt. China has been lending them a lot of money also. So you can see that the US in itself, if it doesn't start a war currently on a global scale to distract the population from all these problems it has, is unlikely. It's unlikely that it will be able to compete with China. It may be it wants to start this war so that it can go and destroy China's industries. Maybe that's how you can, on the other side, that's how you can look at it. That's why it is being provoking and, interfering in the South China Sea and all these places. So maybe that's how you can really conclude about this situation. But it's very unlikely that they will be able to compete. And that is why, of course, we are seeing that the US has put up tariffs on China's electric vehicles, 100% tariff that they should not come. Taxes, 100% that they should not come into China. The taxes were 25%, and Joe Biden increased them to 100%. So all these are attempts to try to catch up, but even with that attempt, still they are behind, technologically when it comes to these vehicles. And
Oh.
then maybe the speed of adoption. The Chinese, they adopt, like they adopt quickly, extremely fast when it comes to adopting even the the new technologies. When it comes into their hands, they rapidly push it, and they push down the price. All right, they push it forward, they push the technology forward rapidly, and then they will push the price down and sell it to the global south also. So unlike the West, that when they have these key technologies, they want to keep it for themselves. They manufacture goods which are only almost for themselves, and
Mhm.
also a few, uh, rich in the in the global south. All right, so that is what happens. But China, when it gets the technologies, it sort of democratizes the technologies. So this is another key element. Why the West, it will be very difficult for it to compete. With how far China has gone.
Thank you, Kwame, for that. Really. Now we cannot talk about China's leading role in industrialization without talking about the intellectual property. Now there always has been many claims that are coming from Europe and the US, and it was, this propaganda was, of course, transmitted through the mainstream media of theirs and other institutional platforms. Now, is it just another false narrative that China has been stealing from the West? And is it true that it's what has led them to where they are now? Or has China been innovating really? I think you have touched it while answering the previous two questions. But yeah, is there anything?
Yeah, I think that China has really been innovative. It has copied partially, and of course that's what all countries do. Even the
Mhm.
United States, when Germany was defeated after World War II, the United States went into Germany and carried all those technologies which were, being invented by the German people, by the Nazi, especially when it came to military technology. All right. So I think that it is a mistake to say that the Chinese are taking their intellectual property. They are not taking really intellectual property. They are doing what all the other countries do. Even the United States itself, when it was developing, people like Benjamin Franklin went to Britain to copy how cotton was spun. Cotton spinning. Then he brought these technologies back to the United States. Okay, so all these happens, they happen. These, when countries are developing, this process happens. All right, so it's not only about China. And the fact that we have said that China has been able to educate 4 times more engineering students, technologically inclined students, and is producing 4 times more engineers than the United States. That should show you where the innovation is coming from. And we've spoken about Huawei itself, and the fact that Huawei was the one who invented 5G. All right. And all these companies who are in the West, like Ericsson and all the others, they are actually operating on patents by Huawei, when it comes to 5G. So I think that it is a mistake to say that this is just, an attempt by the United States to cover up its incompetency and the fact that they have mismanaged the economy. All right, the fact that they deindustrialized their country with some sort of religious, dogma about free market capitalism, what is free market and stuff like that. Now China has really taught them what free market should be. That there is no such thing as a free market. A free market should exist to the extent at which, or the extent to which it benefits a particular country. So it should not be something that should be followed like a religion. All right, there is some sort of god that should be followed around or something, and there should be control. And of course, the United States is learning that the hard way. We saw that the current Biden administration, the democratic administration in the United States now is, adopting state, state control, tactics. Now we look at the CHIPS Act, for example, in the United States, which was passed by Biden, CHIPS and Science Act, Inflation Reduction Act. All these are state interventions where huge subsidies have been given to industry and people. When you look at the dollars which we are giving out, the checks, free checks which we are giving out to the United States families during the COVID period, all these are socialist, interventions. But when they come here over here, they of course they tell us how socialism is bad, and therefore capitalism and free market is what is good. So you should implement free market economics, and that is what we are seeing, of course, when we come to these places, Nigeria, where people are protesting. They are protesting against these neoliberal free market policies, which are almost unbridled, that they leave them to operate freely, and they don't benefit the people. So it is, I think it is a fallacy, and it is the masking of failure by the United States to acknowledge that it has failed. It has very bad policies within itself, and it needs to reform. It needs political reforms. In the United States, they need to reform political reforms to change how they are governing the country. So the failure to carry out these reforms now is being masked as stealing of intellectual property. Instead of carrying out reforms within the government itself, and reform within the education system and all the other sectors, reform within the economy itself, how they are operating. So instead of doing that, they think that it is better to shift the blame on another person, and then this will vindicate them before the American people. I think this is what the ruling class in the United States is trying to do, instead of facing the problem head on, and solving it.
Now, coming to the final part of our discussion here, of course, it's always ends, or we do the conclusion by bringing it to Africa. So, where is now Africa, and how can it benefit from this struggle for control over resources and the capacity of the third industrial revolution, as you have rightly mentioned, laid it out, and this man who wrote the book, what's his
Yeah.
name?
So yeah. So that man, Jeremy Rifkin, who
Mhm.
wrote that book called the Third Industrial Revolution, which is a very good book. I would encourage all Africans to read it, and of course, people of African descent, because of course, there's no building Africa without the people of African descent. It's a huge mistake. It cannot even happen, the rebuilding of Africa, without the people of African descent. Now, the the African continent, I think we have to understand all these things that happened between the United States and China, and what has happened in China. There's huge lessons for the African continent. One, the understanding of technology. All right, we cannot do away without adopting science and technology as African continent. And the person actually who had succeeded, very well at this was Nkrumah. So we have to understand that industries, are hinged on technology. All right. So we have to understand technology, that it has to be part of us. Technology is part of us, and technology is the reason why we were colonized, because these civilizations which came here, they had advanced, ahead of us technologically. That is why we were colonized and taken over. Even though, of course, we managed to survive, unlike other places like South America and the Americas, whereby the indigenous people, and Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, where indigenous people were almost, where all of them were taken over and genocided, and their countries were taken over. We survived, of course, but that is not enough. It means that when we are thinking about developing the African continent, we have to adopt, key technologies. So science, technology, engineering and mathematics have to be at the core of a new Africa that we are trying to build. So that should be in the mind of all African people right now, that we cannot afford again to be behind, because this is even the same item that
I
the West.
really sorry, I don't want to mean to interrupt you, but if you can bring the component of language in this, for example, China uses its own language. If you see the Jews, Israel uses its own language. Um, it's its contribution in terms of technology using your own language. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, so even before you carry out all these technologies, of course, there's uh, what Mao Zedong called the Cultural Revolution. All right. So when you there's stages in development itself when you are trying to do what may be needed in Africa. For example, reconstruction. Okay, what happened in China? That if you have these alien forces, they come and take over your country, then you need a process. You need some form of process, and of course, that is what we are calling reconstruction. You need to chase them away, which is that is liberation in itself, liberating the place. You need to liberate the place. That means you have to chase them away. And then you need to carry out what is called a cultural revolution. All right. So the cultural revolution is like reprogramming your people to take them away from the colonial thinking. Of course, that is when things like that's like re-education. Okay, the cultural revolution is like a re-education process to reprogram the people to back where they are supposed to be. And that is what, of course, Nkrumah called, the he called it the African personality. And even at independence, he said we are going to create our own African personality and identity, and we are going to show the world that if the black man is left, alone, he can govern himself. All right. So this is Nkrumah when he was setting out during independence. That's why it's interesting when we are talking about Nkrumah that like he had a target. For him, he was very clear, in what he wanted to achieve. So after liberation, you have the process of re-education, and that re-education process, of course, is a process of bringing you back to yourself and eliminating the foreign interferences. And of course, the foreign interferences, you only adopt those ones which are beneficial to your society, and those ones which are not beneficial and they will bring you harm, you eliminate them. So that's the process of cultural revolution which happens, and that's what even Mao Zedong in China launched, that he banned writings, for example, in foreign languages like English, and people went back. All news now was published in Chinese. So such a thing, was being launched in Ghana before they overthrew Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So that happens. That is part of the re-education process, and that's the foundation, of course, on to where you build the rest of the things, because education, of course, is where you build the science and technology. That's the process. Is a process of educating, that you are able to give people this knowledge and understanding, and of course continue on in research. So that is where the language itself is very important, that people are able to study in their own mother language, apart from the language which is foreign. And of course, it also helps when it comes to security. Of course, communication for security. That if you have something that you want to talk about, by the time your enemy gets time to interpret, you are already on the next level. You have already implemented to implement. But if we are talking English and our enemy is listening, then definitely gets direct information from us. So that is where this is also very important. What you've spoken about when it comes to language, adopting our own language. Yeah, and of course, a lot of people have been saying.
I would say that if we are on that point, just as we speak English and which they are able to listen, it's their language, but we have been so how do you say, ignorant, if that is the right word, for so long, that there is even another technology. If we start to use now our own language, there's a technology that will translate it for them. So
Absolutely, yeah.
there is no.
It is, but at least by the time somebody maybe pulls out the phone, there's always a difference in time, because remember that the difference, the reason for For example, what they're talking about 5G and 4G is actually seconds, milliseconds. The fact that 5G, you receive information faster than when you receive with the 4G or 3G. Okay, so that's the difference. It's called the latency. The fact that you receive information faster in real time, almost real time. So when you communicate with someone in a language they understand, it's almost like they are receiving information on 5G or 6G, because everything you mention, they take it immediately, right? But now if the person has to pull out a phone put on an interpreter, there's time lost there. All right, there's always time lost there. So you still, when you speak in the local language or you use your own language, you are still going to be ahead of your enemy, somewhere that he has always to struggle with these instruments to interpret what you are talking about, unlike when he would listen to you directly, that he will get information. There's almost no latency between there, that he understands everything, straight away. Like right now, the British or the Americans, they can listen to us and understand straight away what we are talking about. So, but now if they have to put on a gadget to interpret even what we are talking about, the conversation we are having, it takes time. That we may get time to, to implement what we are talking about before they have already figured out what it was about. And even also, because of how languages are structured, normally someone may interpret something and you guys were talking about something else, and they may misunderstand you. All right, because the languages are not the same. Our language, African languages, in most cases are very rich, when it comes to words. Okay, so they are not the same as the Western world. Like the English language is a very poor language, that it doesn't have plenty words. Okay, so you can see that there is still advantages in having, the use of your own language.
But yeah, I interrupted you. I don't think you finished your point in terms of,
Yeah. So what I was saying is that for this what it teaches us, this situation that is happening between the United States and China, is the fact that technology is very important. That is number one. That when it comes to science, technology, English, I mean engineering and mathematics, it has to be at the core of our policy and the new Africa that we want to build. And we have to invest in research, because if it was not for research, I think China would not succeed to the extent at which it is succeeding right now. But it has invested huge amounts of money in research. If you look at Huawei alone as a company, right now they are building a research center, a 4 billion research center right now, is facility just for, it's a 4 billion facility that they want to just research. $4 billion, and they are investing in that. So they invest almost more than I think up to 20% of their revenue, the Huawei as a company, in research. All right, every money they get, 20% of it they invest back in revenue. So they have researchers more. I think this facility which they are putting up is going to house about 30,000 researchers and engineers. Just put them in that facility. So you can see how important, science, technology, research are, in this particular, situation. Now, the other thing which we learn here is organization, that we have to be organized as a people. If you want to take advantage of these technologies, you can't do it if you are disorganized. So we as a continent of Africa, we have to organize ourselves very well, because organization means that these industries which want to come to you with these technologies, they will come to you if you are organized, of course. And you, of course, you have educated population. Right now, of course, Africa has enough educated population. But unfortunately, that some of our best, like scientists, now they flow out of the continent and they go to the West for, of course, labor costs. You can't blame them. They go because of salaries, huge salaries, greener pastures, what is known as greener pastures. But of course, the education, I think educationally, we are not in a very bad position. But reorganization, now what is plaguing the continent is disorganization. You have a lot of these heads of state, everyone going in different direction. Others are implementing, actually most of them are implementing policies which are detrimental to the success of the continent, which are against the continent. Majority of them, that is what they are doing. And then you have a few who are making progress. Okay, so now we have that problem. We have a mismatch in policy that we have really to reorganize ourselves if we want to attract even high value industries. You can see that there's no company which has come to to invest in Africa when it comes, for example, to batteries, the electric vehicle batteries, or the electric vehicles themselves. These companies have not come here. Why? Because we are disorganized. It's not because we don't have a market, and even our market right now, of course, is disorganized because it's not integrated. All right. So all these are advantages which are against us. But also, another thing which we can learn here is that these technologies, according at least to Jeremy Rifkin, who wrote The Third Industrial Revolution, is that we as countries which are behind everyone else when it comes to first and second industrial revolution, just like China, how it was. China was also behind when it came to the first and second industrial revolution. We can leapfrog. You see, this is what experts say, that you can leapfrog everyone. You can easily, it will be easier and cheaper for you to adopt the new technologies. Okay, if you are already behind. An example which he gave, of course, was that Africa was able to adopt, for example, mobile transfer of money when we did not have extensive, banking infrastructure on the African continent. So you saw that Africa was the one who was leading when it comes to mobile money, when it comes to transfer of money using phones. So which meant that each person had a mobile, a banking account, or, using mobile money with just the phone. So the United States, even up to now, is still behind us when it comes to mobile money transfer. They don't normally use, mobile money, transfer. They don't use their phones to make payments, so they are still behind when it comes to that type of technology. But why? Because for them, they already had an established banking infrastructure, and we did not have it here. So it is easier for us to adopt these new technologies because we don't already have, all the infrastructure, and it will be cheaper because it is cheaper to build new than destroy and then build again. All right, or even modify the existing infrastructure. It will be more difficult than somebody who is bringing the new technologies and adjusting them. So I believe that these are some of the things, which we can learn from what is going on, and the fact, of course, that we have to be ready for this struggle, that when also we have reached a certain level of development as a continent, we will get the same problems, maybe with the existing, superpower at that time who will want to interfere with us, because he's seeing that we are also developing these technologies, then they will see a need of suppressing us. So I think that this is time for us to learn how the United States is treating China and how it treated Japan to suppress it technologically when it was rising rapidly and trying to overtake it. So I think these are great lessons for us as a people and as African people.
Wow, I feel like I was I'm in school. Thank you very much, Kwame. Everybody, I'm sure all of our audience is here. I've enjoyed it. How do I know? Because they comment, they ask, they engage consistently. Now, a couple of things. For example, Bonsu Big Well said that China during that revolution, it has lost a lot of people, like a generation there, but Africa cannot afford to lose so many
Yeah,
people.
yeah. So all countries. So you have to understand that the process of building a civilization, it comes with a lot of, challenges, and there's, experiments. So the reason why China lost people, because they were experimenting with their own solutions. All right. For example, Mao's Great Leap Forward, a lot of people died there. All right. I think some people say around 20 million people. But let us remember also in the United States during the Great Depression of 1929, a lot of people died, poverty, hunger, because it was during this phase that experiments were going on. And even the formation of the United States itself, how many Africans were taken from the continent? The formation, the building up of Europe. All these were lives which were lost. So the fact that these lives were not theirs, it doesn't mean that there is no lives which were lost during the building of Western civilization and building the United States as an empire. More than some people put that figure. I think if you go to Nkrumah's book Africa Must Unite and read it, he puts the figure of Africans who were taken from the continent to 20 million people. And a lot of them died. I think about 20% of them died, along the way. All right. The taking over of the indigenous lands in the United States to build the United States, over, I think, up to 10 million indigenous people were killed, all of them. So there's really no, this is common with civilizations and building of civilizations, that there's always experiments which are going on in the process by, architects, by the architects, in the process of finding a solution or finding what really works in building that particular, in building that particular civilization or a country, whatever you may call it. So no one, I think, is immune from what happened in China. So to point it out and put it on China, I think that's a very big mistake, and it doesn't stand up to fact. And of course, I know that the Western world is normally the ones which likes to use this to justify that China should change and behave like how the West is, and should change its governance and imitate the West. So that's the justification. They want to say that, oh, if you have a one-party state, people die. But even when you have a neoliberal government like this, people die. In Africa, we have had these neoliberal governments which are being forced on us, actually. But we have lost over 10 million people, since 1970, to wars, senseless wars and all these, and which wars mostly are being driven from outside. We have lost over 10 million people. If you put it together, the Somalia, Liberia, and the Sierra Leone war, Nigeria, Biafra war, over 1 million people, up to even almost 2 million people, Rwanda genocide, all these they had in their hand, within them. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have lost more than, Leopold himself killed more than, almost 20 million people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so the Germans in Namibia, they killed the Nama and the Herero. So, there's no particular civilization that is, immune to this, but mostly the Western civilization has even killed much more people, and more so people who are not, its own. And deliberately, the Western world actually did it deliberately. For China, you can say that the Great Leap Forward of Mao Zedong killed the people, but Mao, he did not kill them, intentionally. It was an experiment which did not work out. That he was experimenting on how production should go forward. So you can see that there's a huge difference here when it comes to the Western world and the millions that have been killed, and when you go to China. So I think that is very important to address this particular issue when it comes to what happened in both civilizations.
Another thing what we should not forget is also it's child of God here mentioned it in the chat section, that we should not forget that Africans or Black people have invented a lot of things in which they took the ownership. Like, for example, the airplane. We have that thousands of years ago, as an evidence with the writing with the Kemet people in Egypt, not the now Egyptians, the Black
Yeah.
people, the Kemet people there, and many things, so many inventions. They have taken it as if it is them, or they don't talk about some. If it's something that they cannot hide, then they don't tell you who invented them. But I would say that we have to teach our children, our people, since they don't get this in school. What else? Dejuma said everything Kwame stated is why the next AU Commission head is or should be someone with an urgent sense of history who can, in turn, march the leaders to a common goal. Musa Faki Mohammed has been a West of 10
No,
years.
so the thing is, when you learn about the African Union actually does not have power. So let me just say this so that everyone who's on a platform can be able to understand. The power, the African Union has about three structures. Has about three layers, and at the top of the layer is the African heads of state, the 55 heads of state on the African continent. So that's where most of the power is. Now they have also the Council of Ministers. Well, they're like foreign ministers, and this group, they also, each of the African country contributes to that group, and then they have permanent representatives at the African Union. Okay, those ones, they always inform the Council of Ministers of what is happening, at the African Union, and they are permanently stationed at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. Now, these people, and then you have, of course, this is the council for the heads of state. Now you have the African Union Commission. So the African Union Commission is just an administrative structure, but it doesn't really make decisions. So this other body that I'm showing you is the one which makes those decisions. So the chairperson of the African Union Commission does not really make decisions. He just implements what the heads of state have said. Okay, so all power is within the heads of state. So the dysfunctionality of the African Union is because of the African heads of state, that they have denied the African Union power to function. So the African Union Commission and its chairperson like Musa Faki cannot really make any decision. Can you just come and impose anything? Actually, if anything, it normally goes to the heads of state begging. That's what normally goes over there. He goes over there that he has come to consult with them and stuff like that, because they are the ones who are giving the African Union Commission work to do, so that whatever they say, they implement. So whatever you are seeing that is dysfunctional at the African Union in Addis Ababa is because of the heads of state, that they have refused to make solid decisions and give to the African Union Commission to function. And of course, this is also something which Musa Faki brought out. I think it was at the beginning of this year in Accra. He spoke in Accra, and he said that he doesn't have power to make decisions, and like he was complaining that the African Union should be given more power, because he can't make decisions. He cannot make like really serious decisions about the issues that are happening on the continent, apart from reacting to them. Like if there's a coup, then he issues a statement. If there's abuse of African people, then he issues a statement and stuff like that to condemn and stuff like that. But when it comes to really making solid decisions, the power is still in the hands of the heads of state, or the African heads of state. So they refuse to hand over power to the African Union. And so whatever they say is what the African Union does. So
What
whatever they don't
he complain as if he used even the power that he has. He abused it. What for? What he
Yeah,
did?
yes, we abused it in certain areas, like the admission of Israel, for example, to the when the heads of state, I think some heads of state were not aware, or they forced his hand. I think there was some sort of bribery. I think that is what Madame Naledi Pendo, Madame Naledi Pando, who is the former Minister of Foreign Relations of South Africa, she said that there was some bribery in there in the African Union. Morocco especially came in to bribe and stuff like that. But of course, Algeria and South Africa came out to fight against this corruption. But there was some corruption in there, whereby Israel, working with Morocco, they came in to bribe and push their way inside. Morocco was helping Israel to push their way, and then of course to bribe some countries, within the African continent, which could easily be pushed to support Israel. And so that's what happened. But even that one, I don't think it's Musa Faki who did. But in other ways, we see that still France wanted to have him there for certain reasons, that he would not push, because when you are there, you are the chairperson of the African Union Commission. At least you have a chance to interface with all the heads of state. You have a chance to influence them. So if you are charismatic enough, you should be able to influence them to go in certain directions, because you have all the power, in that particular situation. So that is one thing which is advantageous, that maybe we can say that he has not taken advantage of. Back to you, Mallet. I think you are muted.
Okay, I don't think there's another question or concern. And also, it's, I think, good to end it here. Again, I like this. AU needs to be dissolved beyond reform. Uh, yeah, thank you very much, Kwame, and thank you all for tuning in, for being here with us, for engaging, for your time, for everything. We don't take it for granted, and we appreciate each and every one of you. We are so grateful. You guys are the one who keep us, who keeps us going, every day. As I said, it's not easy, but we are here as we know, you give us hope. So yeah, thank you. Really, the benefit is mutual. Imhotep, what are you asking at the end? Corruption is a cause of all problems in Africa.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. But yeah, and Kwame, also thank you very much. For every time you come here, you do not disappoint us. Every day, every day there's something new to learn. And thank you. And I know it's not easy. How it's time consuming to read, to prepare, but you do it passionately and graciously and with love and with dedication. And thank you very much for that, really. Yeah, I think we will meet again tomorrow with you, our audiences. And that's it from me. Unless, Kwame, you have some final words, you say.
No, I just want to thank everyone who is watching, and also to let people know that we have opened a Rambo account. So we want people to go out there on Rambo and look for Connect Africa and subscribe to the channel. We are already there. If you go, you will see our logo, which is on the screen here already, on your top right. So go to Rambo and subscribe to Connect Africa. It is very important, because we want to keep our options open. We are a Pan-African platform. We don't deny that. So, they may want to sabotage us because they don't want to hear the African narrative. So go out there on Rambo, subscribe to Connect Africa, and yeah, let's continue to be part of the journey as we contribute to Africa's liberation. Definitely total liberation this time. We're not talking about just liberation, but as we contribute to Africa's total liberation. So that is very important. So we want to thank you for doing that, and for supporting the channel. And support the channel, you guys. In the PayPal account, send us something so that we can be able to, to keep going. And also the how do you call it? The
Super chat.
Yeah, the super chats. Yeah, yeah, super chat. You can support us in the super chat also. We will be glad. We are
Sometimes
glad.
the funny thing is, I tell you a true story, you people, really. There are so many ways, to gather like collection donations. Everybody, not everyone is into PayPal, not everyone is into, I don't know, whatever it is. There's something that is called like to join, buying coffee, Cash App. And I know that some people even directly they ask us, "Do you have this? It's better for us to donate through this one, through that one." But with work and everything that with our lives going on, I would rather spend it reading and preparing for the next thing that I'm going to bring. And the same with Kwame, than searching for that thing. I mean, it's not to say that, okay, I mean, this is not this is good, but it is that hectic. But yeah, we will try to add up so many options so that you can donate with your own convenience. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, ciao, ciao. And we will see you on the next one. Bye.